Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'm proud to rise with my colleagues in the Conservative caucus today to point out the hypocrisy of the government when it comes to the changes they're making to how small businesses in Canada are taxed. So our opposition motion is bringing forward the need to extend consultations because of the outrage we're hearing from farmers, from small businesses, from tech startups and entrepreneurs, Madam Speaker, and their employees across the country. You know, we've been effectively talking about some of the farming families and some of the small business owners connected with these changes who are outraged, but there are hundreds of thousands of employees, Madam Speaker, are also caught by this change. And why consultations need to be extended, Madam Speaker, is because of the subterfuge played by the government with respect to this issue, announcing the most comprehensive change to how CCPC, small private corporations, are taxed in a generation, Madam Speaker, in the dead of summer, when the consultation period ends after only a few weeks of the House of Commons sitting, was shameful, Madam Speaker. For a government that came in on open and transparent governance, Madam Speaker, to do this in the midst of the summer was outrageous, and certainly that's why we're hearing the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, Chambers of Commerce, Liberal members of Parliament agreeing that it's outrageous, Madam Speaker. So, at a bare minimum, I would like to see the honourable member from Toronto, the Finance Minister, extend the consultation period. At least allow those people who are very fearful of these changes to be heard. He started a call list a few weeks ago, Madam Speaker, and called one or two farmers, but now that other people have been calling him, the Finance Minister has been leaving them hanging, Madam Speaker. We've seen the staged consultation roundtables, Mr. Speaker, where the Finance Minister repeats his talking points, and in the midst of rooms where people are emotional because they feel like they're under attack by a government who's claiming or setting up this debate to suggest they're not paying their fair share. This Finance Minister and this Prime Minister owes it to Canadians to at least hear them out. I think this is a modest request from the opposition today, Madam Speaker, and I hope that some members of the government caucus will see the extension of consultations as a modest request. In 2 years of this government, Madam Speaker, and we're approaching that time frame now of when we remember the big walk-up Rideau Hall and this government with all its openness and transparency, what have they done in that time? They have raised taxes more than any government in the history of our country. Income tax increase, a small business tax increase by ending the phased-in reduction for small business to 9%, which they promised to maintain, Madam Speaker. The MP for Carleton raised that in the House of Commons today. CPP payroll tax increases, taxing employers, Madam Speaker. They've made changes to tax-free savings accounts, which many Canadians have relied on with respect to their own tax planning for their future, Madam Speaker. They've brought in beer and wine taxes. If you have to drown your sorrows in the age of the Liberal tax increases, they're taxing that too. They're taxing sharing, Madam Speaker, by bringing in a new Uber tax. And now the CCPC small business tax changes. That's 7 substantial tax increases in less than 2 years. In the Canada of this Prime Minister, if it moves, it gets taxed, Madam Speaker. And in fact, their rate of increasing taxes, creating new taxes, is truly astounding. It's actually the centerpiece of their government. As they're breaking dozens of promises from electoral reform to support for our military, the one thing that they haven't stopped is raising taxes, Madam Speaker. And what concerns me, as someone that worked in the private sector, worked with entrepreneurs, worked with the engine of growth in our economy, is the way they're setting up and framing this debate, Madam Speaker. I've never seen such a divisive approach to taxation, to to relations within our country when it comes to this government suggesting that small business owners and farmers are somehow tax evaders. You know, I was writing an essay a few weeks ago on this, Madam Speaker, and the most common two-word phrase the Prime Minister uses is the wealthiest 1%. When I researched this some time ago, he used that phrase 65 times as Prime Minister of Canada, only to be surpassed by his most common expression, the middle class and those working hard to join it. Madam Speaker, I know you probably join us when you groan when we hear that latest use of that term in this House, Madam Speaker. But why is he juxtaposing those things against one another, Madam Speaker, and now bringing farmers and small businesses into it? He's suggesting to Canadians that there are people that aren't contributing. He's suggesting that the small business owner, the entrepreneur, the tech startup, or the sixth-generation farming family are somehow making things harder for middle-class Canadians, Madam Speaker, and that is shameful. We have a progressive tax system in Canada that has long ensured that people making more will pay more, Madam Speaker. Those consuming more with the GST will pay more, Madam Speaker. We cut the GST in the Harper government, Madam Speaker, because it impacted lower-income people the most, Madam Speaker, so we reduced it. I'd like to say I'm splitting my time with a member from Perth Wellington, Madam Speaker. I got so passionate that I left that out at the beginning. So you see, he's juxtaposing the people that he is claiming are causing the middle class to be held back, Madam Speaker, when in reality, a lot of middle-class Canadians are employed by these same people. The manufacturers in my riding of Durham, Madam Speaker, the tech startups that I visited in Waterloo, the farming families and the processing businesses related to it. This is who he's attacking. I've never seen such an approach in Canada, Madam Speaker. And for it to be framed in the way the government is doing is shameful, and to be limiting debate when there's the most substantive changes to small business tax rate in a generation is shameful. And what the problem is, Madam Speaker, there's not a revenue problem in Canada, that we should not be raising taxes at all. This government and this Prime Minister has a spending problem, Madam Speaker, not a revenue problem. In fact, in 2015-2016, there was almost $300 billion in revenue. In the recession, when the Harper government had to run a deficit in the midst of the biggest global recession since the 30s, revenues were $233 billion, Madam Speaker. If the revenues the government has now were in place, there would have been no deficit needed. A difference of over $60 billion, Madam Speaker. But the problem, he's spending more than they're bringing in. They're bringing in more, but they keep spending more. So when they promised Canadians, when they asked for their trust in 2015, that they would never run a deficit more than $10 billion, Madam Speaker, they broke that promise in a few months. They can't even get a deficit under $20 billion, Madam Speaker. And most of the money has not been to infrastructure, like they like to suggest to Canadians. It's just been overspending. And why do they think they can get away with that? Because, as I said, they've raised taxes 7 times in under 2 years. And now they're targeting our entrepreneurs and our businesses, our employers, Madam Speaker. And what the Finance Minister doesn't tell those middle class and those working hard to join it is that our entrepreneurs don't have EI, they don't have maternity, they don't have pensions, they don't have paid holidays, Madam Speaker. They are employing people in our communities and they're saving for their future. Female physicians are making sure they have enough to make sure they can provide for their family while they take care of their own maternity leave. I'm glad a doctor in BC informed our Prime Minister of this. He's making changes when he admits he doesn't even understand how it impacts the people he serves. So, a modest proposal, Madam Speaker. Let's extend consultations. This Opposition Day motion is not saying shut down the whole thing like thousands of Canadians are. At least have the dignity, Madam Speaker, to hear Canadians out. Thank you very much.